Hi everyone! So today I want to talk to you about the motorhome routine. I don't even know if to call it a routine as every day is different, but there are certain things that need to be done while traveling in the motorhome, and I wanted to share our experience so far so that you get a better idea of what's happening. Before I start though, I have to mention that although our motorhome is old, it has everything beneath, so a shower, toilet, a little oven, kitchen area. So for those who go traveling in a little van, all the respect for you, don't know how you do it. Going back to my list though, there are a few important things that you need to think about, and they mainly are supply of water for drinking and washing, emptying the dirty water or the grey water as they call it, supply of power, gas for cooking, boiler, etc., diesel, finding where to recycle your rubbish and where to throw your general waste, and emptying the toilet. Sorry, but that's part of the motorhome life, so I have to talk about it. And obviously food and booze sometimes, or well, every time. Mark researched a lot before we started to travel, and he's also planning where we're going to stay next. And in France, for example, there are a lot of places where you can park for free, but we found that is generally valid for most of the countries that we've been to, apart from Slovakia, I think, and apart from Slovenia. In Slovenia you couldn't park wherever you wanted to, and it's the same in the UK, but most of the other countries we managed to stay pretty much for free in most places. So before going to the next stop, we need to sort out all the points that I was talking about a bit earlier. And Mark uses his favorite app called Park for Night, that gives you the service points as well and where you can find services. But sometimes while we drive, we could just see signs for a motorhome and with an emptying sign under. So that is usually a sign that you could find services around. A lot of places, as I was saying, are free. Like in, a lot of places for services are free or very cheap. You can get them around €2, and if you choose to or need to go into a campsite, then it can get more expensive. But luckily we managed to avoid campsites most of the times, apart from a few exceptions, but I'll talk about this in another episode. For electricity, we have a solar panel, so we can charge phones and tablets just by staying in sunny countries. We did have an instance when we completely ran out of battery, and oh boy, couldn't even turn the tap on because everything runs on the battery. But we learned our lesson now and trying to turn off the 12 volt while driving and keeping our devices on battery saving mode. In fact, I would recommend this for anyone. I mean, how many apps we can use at one time? But anyway, we fill in the tank with water. That's around 120 liters for washing and so on, and about 40 liters of drinking water, so we have separate containers that we refill from the tap. You have to check every time that the water is potable, although most of the time it is, but there are countries like Poland, for example, where we were advised not to drink the tap water, so we had to buy bottled water. But other than that, we managed to get tap water from most places, from most countries. But again, just make sure you double check that the tap that you're using has potable water, because sometimes even if you get to a service point, you have two taps and one of them is for washing the toilet and one of them is for drinking water. So please pay attention to that. So service points usually have water and facilities to empty the dirty water or the grey water and the toilets. We even found services in supermarket parkings. That's a very clever tactic to make you do your shopping in there. You'll also find that a lot of supermarkets have washing machines outside. You can just drop the coins in and put your clothes in and come back half an hour later, they're all done. And they have dryers as well, so it's all very handy and easy. But if not, you can find little places in little towns where you can just go and do your washing. I do wash by hand sometimes as well, especially the little things, so that's quite easy and handy, and most of the time it was nice and warm and they dry really quickly. But we do need to wash like the bed sheets and pajamas and big, sweaters and things like that. So we do use both washing machines, and I wash by myself as well. Mark empties the toilet, so unlucky, I don't have to do that. But I sort out the bins. We try to use as much as we can public toilets. For rubbish, there are plenty of spots where you can sort it out, and you can usually see them as you drive. So you just park safely and then dispose of your rubbish. And please make sure you check in every country, because it's already different by country, and it's also different by region within the countries on how they recycle. So I especially had troubles in Germany, where I had to figure out, because they even sort out the glass by the types of colors of glass. Should be easy because most of them have images, but sometimes they only had writing on them, and then I had to use translate and contact my relatives that speak German. But anyway, just be aware that different countries have different rules. And another thing, for example, when we were in Switzerland, most of the general waste bins where we were in that area, they were locked with a key, and we couldn't get our general waste out for about 2 weeks. But they do that in order to protect the environment. So, for example, wild animals that come around, they smell something and they go into the general waste bin, and then they can get infected with food that is off, or so basically they're trying to protect the environment, protect the animals, and protect themselves, because if animals get sick, then they can get people humans sick as well. So I understand their tactic, but yeah, we had 2 weeks where we couldn't dispose of our general waste. Also, not everywhere, but in most countries at some point you'll find bins specifically designed for clothes. So if you want to get rid of something, then use those bins, put them in a bag and leave them there, and basically they will sort it out later and give it to charities. So that's a good way of doing that, because sometimes we go to second-hand shops, for example, and I find a dress or something that I like, and then the policy at the moment is one thing in and one thing out. So if I buy something, then I need to dispose of something else, but I want to do it in an environmentally friendly way. So when we find those kind of bins, well, they're not bins, they're containers where you can leave your clothes, so then you can do that. Right, so Mark does most of the cooking and I do most of the cleaning, and I must say motorhomes get very dusty very quickly. Although it's a small space, so it's easier to clean, but you need to do it more often, or at least I need to do it more often. I want to. We buy a lot of tinned food and fresh food as well, so we buy a nice mix of things, and mostly vegetarian stuff. So I would say we eat 80% of the time vegetarian food, and then other than that we eat seafood and fish and very rarely meat. So we don't spend generally too much on food, and we realized that we can go out from time to time for lunch, because lunch is usually cheaper than dinner. And we can just spoil ourselves sometimes. We have a very strict budget, and I keep spreadsheets and updating them regularly, but I will talk to you about it in another episode about budget and how we do it, how we manage that. We get diesel once a week or sometimes once every 10 or even 14 days, depending on how long we stay in one place. We get gas for cooking and fridge and so on once a month. Once we empty and refill everything else, this usually keeps us going for about 7 to 10 days. And then after that, we need to do it all over again. And that's especially with running water. So sometimes we found places where we could park. For example, in Spain, where you were in a nice wild area, but you still had access to clean water. So in those kind of cases, we could stay even longer because the main thing that you need is at the end water. And with tinned food, we could last quite a while, especially that Mark can make such good food just by using beans, some onions, some tinned tomatoes, garlic, chilies, mixing up, doing his magic tricks, and then we get nice cooked food. And then I usually had flour and making bread, so we could really last for a long time without needing to go to the shops too often. That is actually a very good practice for the pandemic, because once the pandemic started, we felt like we had a full year of training of being in isolation and lasting for a long time without going to the shops and lasting with tinned food and baking bread and things like that. So yeah, we had a really good training during 1 year. We try to be very calculated about the water and gas that we use, and that includes taking quick showers and only boil as much water as we need for drinks. Or we store the hot water in our magic one bottle from Route 7. It keeps the hot water for 20 hours and the cold water for 30 hours. So that was really helpful when we were going for really long walks. And no, this is not an advert. I'm not paid to say that. But I really, really, really love those bottles. They're really handy for us. Okay. I boil a kettle separately to wash my hair. And I had a good training from my student years living in a small room with 3 other girls in Bucharest. And sometimes we didn't have hot water, so we just had to be creative. And yeah, I had a lot of practice from there as well. Also, every time before we move to another place, we have to store and lock everything in cupboards, otherwise it will be a disaster, as you can imagine. We usually go for long walks every day. You can find walking trails on wikiloc, or there's another app called komoot, Komoot. And again, all the apps and all the advices I'm giving in this article, I'm not being paid for saying anything. This is literally what we use and what we like. And if we don't go for walks, I do painting. Mark can go for his mountain biking. And if we're around swimming places, we go swimming. Or like sometimes we stay near really quiet rivers. We go and dip into really nice and cold, refreshing water from the rivers. So yeah, it's very different. We sometimes, because we have an inflatable kayak, we do kayaking sometimes. So yeah, it's very different every day, depending on the area, depending on where we are. Also, if we're around cities, and by the way, good advice for everyone. If you plan to visit cities, do not park in the actual busy city, because it's more dangerous than leaving it in the nature somewhere. So usually we park somewhere outside the city that we want to visit, and then we take public transport and we get to wherever we need to get to. So yeah, if we have planned a day in the city, then we would just go and, I don't know, go to museums, do a free guided tour, go to restaurants, go for brunches and things like that, which wouldn't happen too often, but we do that sometimes. So I would say maybe 1 or 2 cities per country, and we've visited about 12 countries, I think, in 1 year. So it's not that much, but yeah, depends on where we are. We spend our days very, very differently. Okay, so that's about it about the routine. I have so much more to talk about, but don't worry, there'll be more episodes to come, and I hope you are really enjoying this. And if you want to leave me feedback or you want to ask me questions, you can either find my contact details on my website www.moldovanabroad.com, or I'll leave my email address in the notes of this podcast. Have a great day.